This felt daisy starts with the center strip. We glue along the length and fold it in half. And then we're going to cut fringe along the folded side, and this fringe will create the center. So lay some glue down and then the stem and then roll it up. I like to really pinch it in there to make sure it stays on the hot glue as it hardens. Roll it up, glue as you go, keep the bottom of the center flat. And now we're ready to add our petals. I just start with one petal around the circle and then do one right next to it. And I have all the measurements in the pattern for you so that you know this will fit well around the circle. So I just go all the way around and it will match up to where they all fit together there with 6 petals on the first layer. Then we get to add a second layer, and I had not ironed this felt before I made this flower, so these petals look a little funny right now, and I'm going to use a hair straightener to straighten it out here in a second. But for now, we're just adding a second layer of petals, staggering them in between the petal in front of it to fill in those gaps, and all we need are 2 layers of petals for a total of 12 petals on this daisy flower. Then we cut a slit in that back and bring up the leaf and put some glue. I like to put glue on all 4 corners and bring it up tall around the daisy just to make sure nothing shows. And I used a hair straightener here, a little mini hair straightener, to flatten out those daisy petals so everything laid nice and smooth for this finished flower. To make this carnation flower, we are simply adding glue to each of the bottom of these petals and then pinching it around the stem or the other petals that we've added. So it's really a pretty simple flower to make, but it's kind of one of those that you have to play around with as you go because you're pinching and looking and seeing how you like the layered look, and you can always add glue to create more folds and more, dimension as you go. So we're just placing petals around, pinching, seeing if we like it, and just kind of going around the circle. This is one of those flowers that I tended to overcomplicate. I really didn't have a good carnation design that I liked, and I realized I needed to simplify it for my style and just place the petals, pinch at the bottom where the glue is, and then that hardens, the glue hardens, and the petal has a kind of a creased, like flowy, wrinkly look like a carnation does. So it also pops the petal out and gives some gaps in between that creates that ruffled look. So all I'm doing is just adding those petals around, and it's really that simple, I promise. Then adding the back to it and adding glue. There we go. I love using circles to make felt flowers, and this is one of my favorite felt flowers to make. So we're wrapping a circle around a floral stem and making it nice and tight to give that center, and then we're going to stagger petals on the outside of that. So I started with 1 circle in the middle, and then I do 2 around that center, and then I do a layer of 3 right here. So we're doing a layer of 3. Now the important thing with this circle rose is to get a continuous loop to where we have one side of the circle over and one side of the circle under. We don't want both over on one side or both under. So the way we do that is leave a little flap, and then when we come back around that layer, we put the flap underneath the circle where we started and glue it back on top. So I do 2 layers with 3 circles, and then this last layer has 4 circles on it. And then we're going to add a little detail here where we put a pinch of glue on the top outside of that circle and pinch backwards, and that gives us just a little touch of elegance for this felt rose and bumps it up a little bit to just kind of a new fun level of a design. So after we're finished pinching those outer circles, then I add the back and just bring up the center of that to the center of the back of the flower to cover up anything that might be showing that we don't want to show, and it's a pretty green accent as a backdrop for this flower. To make a felt peony, we start by cutting fringe along the strip that we use as the center of the flower. I like to use these scissors because they have a spring that helps open the scissors back up and makes it easier to cut the fringe. Then we wrap it around the floral wire by putting glue down and adding the stem and then wrapping it around, keeping the bottom flat. So I'm just wrapping this around the wire, keeping it flat, and then the fringes at the top. Then I'll place the petals around the center, putting the glue at the bottom, placing the bottom of the petal at the bottom of the center and just pinching it on. And I do like this first layer to stand up tall to kind of give this petal this flower a full look with all of these petals because we're going to keep adding on layers. So the first layer of petals is done. That was 3, and then we're going to do another layer of 3 petals and just stagger those in the gaps that were created when we added the first layer. So just placing one between the 2 in front of it, and then we'll do a total of 6 after we're finished with this layer. And then we're going to come back behind this layer and just add on more petals. So you can do as many as you want. I ended up using 15 total. So a layer of 3, another layer of 3, and then a layer of 4, and then a layer of 5. And that creates the full look I am wanting for this peony inspired felt flower. There are so many different varieties, of course, and ways that you can make this felt flower, but this one works for me in a way that doesn't require any complicated cutting. So it's great for beginners and just requires some simple gluing and placing petals around. And you really can't go wrong. You're just wanting it to look layered, not stacked up behind. So just think about filling in gaps to create this really pretty full layered flower. And then we're going to add the back of the flower on to cover it up and just give it that finished look. This is the shape I use, putting hot glue and then just bringing it up behind. And you can glue each of those points back if you want, or just kind of leave them open, whatever you prefer. So we are finished with this felt peony. It's on a stem, but you can also make it without a stem and add it to a wreath or whatever other creations you can think of. This is just a really fun felt flower to make, and one of my favorites to try in different varieties. To make this Magnolia felt flower, we're starting with a center strip and using some scallop scissors to create that angled strip across from corner to corner, then cutting fringe with scissors at the dip of each of those scallops, and then adding the stem to the middle, starting at the tallest side of the center strip. Then just rolling it up, keeping the bottom flat, which creates that center design for this Magnolia felt flower. Then we're starting with our 3 smallest petals, just placing those evenly around the center. Now I say evenly loosely because mine are not going to be perfectly even, and that's totally fine. We're just placing this felt onto the bottom, lining up the bottom of the petal with the bottom of the center, and just pinching and just kind of playing with the shape of the felt. And you can push in the bottom and then just kind of tilt it back to give a little bit of an angled look. So this one is a little bit more advanced of a flower, and I only say that meaning you might need to practice it a little bit more, but it's not hard, I promise. Anyone can make this felt flower. For these 6 larger petals, we're doing 2 layers of 3, and that little tab at the bottom kind of goes underneath. That's where we pinch it and then just bring it back, and that tilts the felt petal back when we do that pinch. And then for each of those 6 larger petals, we're doing a little bit of glue at the tip, the top inside part of that shape, and then just pinching it closed. Now here's the hard part. You're probably going to get hot glue on your fingers. If that bothers you, this is not the flower for you, or you can wear some protection on your hands. This detail tip hot glue gun makes a huge difference, so I recommend that. For these larger petals, they were falling back too much. I wanted it to be a little bit more closed, so all we have to do to fix that is put a little bit more hot glue on the bottom of those petals and just glue them to each other so they stand up a little bit more and bring them in towards the center. So we can always play with our shapes by adding more glue and kind of telling our petals where we want them to go. Then we add the back fold and create that slit, and then just slide the stem through and then put glue on the back, and we have a finished felt Magnolia flower. I also love to make this flower with some light pink shading, just using eyeshadow on those petals, so that's something else that's fun to try. But this is a really great, beautiful, elegant felt flower that just uses a few simple shapes. So I'm cheating on the sunflower, but I promise I like the end result, and I think you will too. I'm just using 1 long strip, like really, really long. It's actually 3 long strips, and just twirling that around the center stem, gluing as I go so it doesn't become unraveled. But this will create a nice big round circle for the center of the sunflower. And then we're just going to add petals. So this is so much easier and faster than doing a folded strip and cutting each of those slits. And I still love the end result. You do 2 layers of petals here, just stagger that second layer around the first, and we are finished with our felt sunflower. You do need a large back to cover that flower, but it looks really good. I do glue up the 4 corners to give give this nice finished look to the sunflower. This is a pale yellow one just for fun, but all colors look great. This leaf stem is super simple. We're doing one leaf pinched around the top of the floral wire, and then we're going to use a thin 22 gauge floral wire that's about 4 inches long and wrap that around the main stem and then add a leaf to each end. You can adjust the length of that as you want to by making it shorter or longer or twisting it more around that center stem, but this just gives us a simple leaf stem for our bouquet.